ancient technologies. Stone clamps. What is their purpose? What is their use? Now, a couple of reasons that you might use stone clamps is to try to prevent a potential shift, make it harder for the stones to move around from weather. So it could be a way to prevent strong winds from potentially pushing the stones and causing, whatever structure you created with stone from collapsing. That could be one reason for it. The fact that these clamps are largely made of metal, right? Largely made of metal. One thing I know is that metal would make noise, right? Especially if it's bending, it'll make noise. So that's something to take into account, that they could potentially have made noise, therefore it could be a way of letting the builders, right, build the walls and stuff, know that there's some issue with the wall, like the wall might collapse, so they might need to start fixing it, might start trying to reinforce it, right, make sure that it doesn't fall down. So that's one possibility of why they use this. Another possibility, obviously, would be just to reinforce, right, just to make the wall tougher from getting hit by, cannonballs, right, wrecking balls, rams, right, things of that nature, right? Because that's something we gotta take into account. Is like if you're using big stone, making big stone walls, big stone structures. To me, that's fortification, right? So if you're using heavy, thick material to build something, you're building a fort, essentially, right? Fortification. You're building a defensive structure. So this would be a way to reinforce that defensive structure. So that's one good way of doing it. Another thing I thought about, which, like I said, when it came to movement, right, especially something constantly hitting something, especially when it comes to frequencies or vibrational resonance, right? Resonance frequencies. This would be a good way to potentially reduce it, right? By trying to make the wall a bit flexible, right? By having these metal pieces or joints, if you want to call it that, right? These little clamps. So when the stone starts shaking, these clamps will kind of try to hold it in place. So like move slightly along with the vibrations, right? Shaking, and it'll reduce the the movements of the stone, which will prevent the stone wall, if it's a wall, for example, from falling apart. So this could be, a way to protect against vibrations, like from an earthquake or from some form of a sound-based frequency resonance, right? Some resonance frequency type technology, just in case that stuff was available. You needed that level of fortification, right? It wasn't enough to have something solid that would be hard for somebody to just push over or walk through, right? Because it's a solid object, right? Big stones, right? Hard to move. So it'd be hard for an individual person to move it. But if somebody had some form of technology, like a battering ram, catapult, right? To throw cannonballs, a cannon, right? To shoot cannonballs, that kind of stuff, right? So to make it harder, that's where this would come in, right? A way of reinforcing, a way to adding extra defense. Another possibility is, especially when it comes to like vibrations, technology, these can act as, especially based off of the designs, the way they look, it could be a form of vibration absorption, maybe some energy absorption, right? They'll act like shock absorbers, so to speak, because they'll absorb vibrations, especially depending on the type of material. Because if you're using a specific type of metal that resonates at a certain frequency, this could be like a frequency dampener, right? Earthquake dampening system. It could be along those lines. Right? The fact that these are shallow, like they only go in, but like I guess an inch deep into the rock, as opposed to going way deeper, so it could use more material. Notice that it's a little thin. It's not too thick where it connects. Like the fact that it narrows down, because if you look at the shapes, it tends to narrow down to a small size. I'll say like an inch type of open gap in between where the crack is at, right here. You see this little area right here is a lot smaller than out here. Instead of being a big rectangle here, so that we have a big metal bar, right? That we from up here to down here, you have a big metal bar. There, it's a smaller bar. So most of the mass of these clamps tend to be more towards the end of them, right? Like the T-shaped ones, than it is towards the center where the two blocks meet. So there's less metal where the two blocks meet than there is on the block's surface itself, the blocks themselves. Which seems a little bit of like I said, seems a little bit of less, because you're using less material there, so there's less strength there, less support, right? Less reinforcement there. So seems somewhat of a waste if you think about it based off of the shape. To have it like that. I understand that to a certain level you want a level of grip, right? Grip strength. You don't want to make a rectangle specifically because of the possibility of it just sliding out. It's just because it's straight, it's horizontal, it's straight, so it's just slide out. You want shape, right? The T shape and this bow tie shape, let's call it that. Helps hold it in place, right? But the main thing I was pointing out was the where it connects in the center, where the two stones meet. There's less metal there, right? There's going to be less metal there, and that's where a lot of the friction and movement is going to happen. Is in that area. You would think they'll make it thicker, right? Way thicker, so there'll be more metal trying to hold these two stones together, these two surfaces together. That's something I was looking at. I was thinking like, what would be the best shape for this thing? And I was thinking like, I also noticed that the shapes, the T shape is one that I do like. I always like that shape. I do consider that to be a better shape for this thing. But it depends on the purpose. Like for reinforcement, definitely T shape. But the bow tie shape, that would be for a different purpose. So then it's a matter of thinking like, okay, what would the purpose be? Why would I use the bow shape when the T shape works just fine, right? But it does depend where these are. I didn't take the time to look around and be like, okay, what areas in the world use the T shape, and then what parts of the world uses the bow tie shape. I, I, I want to assume that they're largely used in a lot of the same areas. So there might be a structure where you see the T shape. In the same structure, you might see the bow tie shape. It's like, okay, so they're both being used, so that means they have different purposes. Because why use different shapes when you could just use the same shape if it serves just one purpose? So having two shapes indicates two purposes, two reasons for it. If it's in the same location. If it's in different locations, you could just be like, okay, they just use different shapes because they're different people, right? Different cultures, different viewpoints, and they just chose a shape that they liked, and they went with that shape. So it was just more of a cultural thing, less of a functional thing, right? But if they're in the same location, then I'm like, okay, then the same person who made the T shape also made the butterfly shape, and there has to be a reason for it. If it's the same person, there's a reason we use two different shapes instead of using one preferred shape. It has to have a purpose. There has to be a reason for it. If I'm right, the bow tie shape would be easier to carve, if I'm right, than the T shape. So you would think that the easier thing to do will be the thing you do the most, which is the bow tie. You would think you would use that, a lot and build something. I mean, as a builder of things myself, yeah, when I like something and it works, I keep using it over and over again. So I'm convinced otherwise, convinced to use a different shape or a different thing. But typically, I just keep using the same thing over and over again because it works, right? If it ain't broken, why fix it? So there's no reason to use a different shape if one specific shape works. So if there's two shapes in the same location, there's a reason for it, and we just need to find out what's the function, what's the purpose, right? Why is one shape different from the other? Let's see. Why they're using different shapes. What else could these things be for? And it's a pretty simple thing. They mentioned that it doesn't go that deep, so it feels less of the trying to reinforce per se. It feels more like it's there for a simple purpose, simple task. It could just be there to help well, it can't be for alignment, because if it was going to be alignment just to make sure that everything lines up perfectly, then it would just be a rectangle, basically like a straight line where you can put a piece of metal in there, right? And line things up, metal, wood, whatever. The point is, it's just so you can make sure everything is straight, right? Everything is uniform, perfectly lined up. The fact that it has the bow tie shape or the T shape, that to me is for stability. That's for gripping strength. So it doesn't, the two pieces do not come apart like it does in this image, where right here, clearly these two pieces of stone are not touching each other anymore. So the gripping strength is to keep the stones together. So obviously a logical reason you want to keep the stones together is because you don't want them to separate. If they separate, that's a problem. That means the wall or the structure you built might fall apart eventually, right? The fact that it's a small amount means this was meant to be something temporary. This is meant to be temporary. I feel like this was this wasn't part of the original structuring of the structures per se, or technically it was. What I'm trying to say is this was like an add-on. Like they were like, okay, we're going to have certain issues and we need to do this. There's a possibility that they literally they built a structure, then they start having certain issues, or like there was earthquakes maybe. I'll use earthquakes as an example. Earthquakes was being an issue, and it's like, okay, the stone, the walls, and stuff like that are coming apart. We need to kind of glue them together, right? Nail them together, whatever you want to call it, fasten them together. So that's where the stone clamps comes in, right? So it's like, all right, now we need to take this wall apart, rebuild it, but we need to put these shapes on it, put metal, right? Molds, melt down some metal, put it into the shape, let it cool, then bang, there, instant clamp, right? Instant perfect fit. And then do that multiple times, stack all the rocks back, stones back on top of it, and rebuild the wall. And then do that multiple times if you're trying to add this feature to the whole entire structure. So that's a possibility, because a lot of structures don't have stone clamps, but there are many of them that do, or at least a few that do. So there has to be a reason for why these were added. Consider the fact that the same process and principles of stacking these stones in the first place is they're heavy, it'd be hard for them to move by an individual person or even wind, unless we have really strong winds, or like a hurricane or something really massive. So not only could this be for earthquake proofing, this could also be for hurricane proofing. Stone structures or concrete structures, especially reinforced concrete structures, tend to be more resistant against powerful wind, hurricanes, stuff like that. So that's something I was looking into, of the idea of like, okay, how many structures have it, where they have it specifically, is it everywhere, or is it just mainly like the outer walls type of stuff? So if it's mainly in the outer walls, then it does further, go with the idea like, okay, it's definitely a form of fortification, right, or reinforcement of the fortification, make the wall stronger. Possibly is for any type of impact related, vibration related, like earthquakes, frequency vibration type of situation that you're going to need to fortify to increase, right? Sorry. So anti-impact could be a big giant person trying to punch through the wall, and this will help reduce their ability to punch through successfully, right? It'll add a form of resistance. So, that type of stuff, or battering ram, or anything of that nature, or comet impact, something like that. Would it be perfect in every situation? No, not necessarily, but it's better to have this and not need it than to need it and not have it, right? So if I were to build something and I wanted to make it a little bit tougher, a little bit more sturdy, this is something I would do. I would create something like this to be like, all right, cool. This will add a bit of extra strength to the structure. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at it as if, why would I do this? It's the purpose that I would have for using these shapes, for, building this way, especially if I'm not using stuff like mortar, cement, right? Using some type of form of so-called glue. Why would I do this? Especially with the fact is like, well, the stone's already heavy, so once I put them in place, the likelihood of them moving is very, very slim. Not impossible, but just very slim. So why add some form of glue, unless I'm trying to make it even more reinforced? Because for some reason, I believe something will be able to move the stones, right? The stones from the wall. I need this to increase the chances of that not happening. That's where this might come in. That's the end of the video.